There are few moments in a person's life as hollow as standing by a fresh grave while the heavy weight of grief is entirely overshadowed by the sudden, chilling betrayal of the person you trusted most. My name is Maya, and at 34 years old, I stood in the bitter chill of a November afternoon, watching the earth settle over my father's casket. My father, a quiet, hard-working man who had spent his entire life building a modest architectural legacy, had passed away after a long, exhausting illness. But the grief suffocating my chest wasn't just for the father I had lost, it was for the horrific realization waiting for me back at his estate. When the mourners had slowly dispersed and the cemetery grew quiet, I returned to my father's prized possession, a breathtaking, multi-million-dollar penthouse condo overlooking the city skyline, a masterpiece valued at $30 million that he had poured his heart and soul into designing. I walked up to the heavy mahogany double doors, exhausted, my eyes stinging with unshed tears, and pressed my thumb against the biometric lock. The panel blinked a harsh, condemning red. Access denied. Frowning, I tried the physical key my father had given me years ago. It turned in the cylinder, but the deadbolt held firm from the inside. A heavy click echoed through the corridor, followed by the sharp slide of a secondary security chain locking into place. I knocked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Rohan. Open the door." "It's me." After a tense moment, the heavy oak door cracked open just an inch, restrained by the metal chain. My husband's face appeared in the narrow gap. His eyes, usually warm and familiar, were ice-cold, stripped of any empathy or sorrow. He wasn't wearing morning black, instead, he was dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, holding a glass of scotch as if he were celebrating a corporate victory rather than mourning my father's death. "You can't come in here, Maya," Rohan said, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. "This property belongs to me now. The locks have been changed, and your name has been scrubbed from the deed. You're standing outside a stranger's home." The sheer disbelief of his words left me breathless, standing in the cold hallway of the building my own father had designed, staring into the eyes of the man I had loved and supported for over 10 years. Before that horrific afternoon, our life together had possessed a comfortable, almost deceptive rhythm. My name is Maya, 34 years old, and for a decade, I had balanced running my own boutique interior design studio with supporting Rohan's ambitious climb in real estate development. I remember the early years vividly, the cramped apartment where we ate instant noodles off a cardboard box, the late nights when Rohan would bury his face in his hands, exhausted and defeated by corporate rejections, and how I would rub his shoulders, whispering that he was destined for greatness. I gave him everything, my savings, my connections, and my unwavering belief in his potential. When my father's health began to fail, I spent my days juggling hospital visits, client deadlines, and managing our household, trusting Rohan completely when he offered to handle the complex legal and administrative paperwork surrounding my father's estate. "It's just too much emotional weight for you to carry right now, sweetheart," Rohan had told me just weeks ago, wrapping his arms around me with a tender, reassuring smile, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. His voice had sounded so soothing, so grounded in genuine care. "Let me deal with the lawyers, the deeds, and the property transfers. You just focus on saying goodbye to your father." I had believed him. I took comfort in the warm weight of his embrace, mistaking his calculated manipulation for devotion. But looking back now, the subtle cracks in his facade had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. I just refused to see them. There were the late-night phone calls he would suddenly step out of the room to take, his hushed whispers cutting off the moment I walked into the kitchen. There was the sudden influx of luxury watches, tailored suits, and corporate galas where he began introducing himself not as a project manager, but as the principal owner of high-end urban properties. When I asked him about the sudden shift in our finances, he would brush it off with a smooth, practiced laugh, claiming he had secured a massive commission deal. I tried to shake off the nagging doubts, telling myself I was just being paranoid, overwhelmed by the grief of losing my father. I wanted to trust my husband. I wanted to believe that the man who had promised to stand by me in sickness and in health was a partner, not an adversary. Standing outside those heavy double doors now, the bitter truth crashed over me with the force of a physical blow. The late nights, the sudden wealth, the smooth reassurances, none of it was about corporate success. It was a meticulously planned heist, executed right under my nose while I was distracted by a dying father. The revelation didn't hit me all at once, it washed over me in cold, suffocating waves as I stood outside those heavy mahogany doors. Rohan, open this door right now, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing its tremor and hardening into something sharp. We are not doing this here. My father hasn't even been in the ground 24 hours, and you are standing inside his home acting like a thief. Unlock the chain. Rohan let out a soft, condescending chuckle, the kind of patronizing sound he had started using more and more over the last year whenever I questioned his decisions. The chain rattled as he shifted his weight inside. Maya, let's be reasonable, Rohan replied, taking a slow sip of his scotch. Your father's estate went through probate months ago. Through proper legal channels, asset redistribution, and corporate assignment, the deed to this $30 million penthouse was transferred directly to my holding firm. Your name isn't on the title. Legally, morally, practically, you have no claim here. The locks are changed, the security system is updated, and if you don't leave the premises right now, I will have building security escort you off the property. Don't make a public spectacle of yourself. It's unseemly. Corporate assignment. Proper legal channels. Probate. Every polite, clinical word he used felt like a knife twisting in my ribs. While I sat in sterile hospital rooms holding my dying father's frail, trembling hand, whispering words of comfort as his life slipped away, my own husband had been sitting across from shady corporate lawyers, forging signatures, exploiting power of attorney documents I had signed in blind trust, and systematically erasing my birthright. The shock gave way to a cold, razor-sharp fury. For 10 years, I had built him up from nothing. I had fed him, financed his early ventures, and introduced him to the very elite circles that made his career possible. And his reward for a decade of unwavering loyalty was to lock me out of my family home on the very day my father was buried, thinking he had completely outsmarted me. You think you're very clever, don't you, Rohan? I whispered, stepping closer to the door, my voice dangerously calm. You think because you bribed a few corrupt clerks and slipped papers past me while I was weeping over a hospital bed that you've won? Rohan's smug expression flickered for a fraction of a second, replaced by a momentary flash of unease before he quickly masked it with a sneer. Save the melodrama, Maya. The courts deal in documents, not tears. And my documents are ironclad. Are they? I asked, a cold, quiet smile touching the corners of my lips. Because it seems to me you made one fatal assumption. You assumed that because my father built this empire, his name was the only one on the foundation. Rohan's sneer faltered, the glass in his hand halting halfway to his mouth. What are you talking about? I'm talking about ownership, Rohan, I said, my voice steady, carrying the quiet authority of a woman who was no longer broken, but reborn in fury. You spent months looking at the surface titles, the corporate shells, and the public probate filings. But you never bothered to check the foundational trust documents filed 30 years ago, long before you ever entered our lives. I reached into my handbag, pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope bearing the official, embossed gold seal of my family's legal counsel, and held it up right against the narrow crack of the door. My father wasn't just an architect, Rohan. He was a paranoid, brilliant visionary who protected his family's legacy long before modern corporate theft became your specialty. The deed you hold? It's tied to an operating LLC. And under the original master trust agreement, registered with the Federal High Court under Clause 9, no real estate asset belonging to the family estate can ever be transferred, sold, or reassigned without the explicit, notarized co-signature of the primary blood heir. I let the words hang in the heavy air of the hallway. That's me, Rohan. Not a single signature you forged is worth the paper it's printed on. In fact, by attempting to unilaterally seize a restricted trust asset under fraudulent pretenses, you've just committed felony property misappropriation. The color drained entirely from Rohan's face. The arrogant corporate swagger vanished in an instant, replaced by a frantic, panicked realization as he stared at the gold-sealed envelope in my hand. Maya, wait. Let's talk about this, he stammered, the glass of scotch slipping from his trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor inside the foyer. We can work this out inside. You locked me out of my father's house, I interrupted, my tone chillingly calm as I turned away from the door. Now, let's see how you explain to the district prosecutor and your corporate board why you're squatting in a federal trust asset that doesn't belong to you. The truth spread faster than wildfire. Within 48 hours, the public consequence was absolute and merciless. When the federal marshals and legal investigators arrived at the penthouse, Rohan was forced out in disgrace, stripped of his fraudulent title, his corporate position, and the illusion of the empire he had tried to steal. The legal system moved swiftly, and his name was dragged through the very financial circles he had tried so desperately to impress, leaving him with nothing but the echoes of his own greed. Standing on that same balcony weeks later, looking out over the glittering city skyline as the morning sun warmed my face, the heavy grief in my chest had finally transformed into enduring peace. I had lost a father, but I had found a strength I never knew I possessed, proving that while deceit can build a temporary castle, truth and integrity are the only foundations that truly stand the test of time. The storm outside my window had long since cleared, leaving behind the crisp, bright light of a new afternoon and the quiet hum of a life reclaimed. Sitting here in the sunlit study of my home, surrounded by the architectural sketches my father left behind, I realize that true strength isn't about never getting hurt, it's about refusing to let someone else's greed steal your dignity. I learned the hard way that people will show you who they truly are when things get heavy, but you must never forget who you are in the process. Betrayal tries to make you small, but integrity always finds a way to stand tall. Would you have seen right through his lies the way I did, or would you have trusted the man you loved? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. This is Revenge Dismantled, thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of your heart.